Hi, I'm Liz Peetz. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs at CAR, and guess what? It's been a couple of weeks. I know you're excited. All those political ads are down, but another election is in the dust, to quote Queen. But anyway, let's talk about what the election results mean for you and for your clients. So first, let's talk a little bit about what this election was for Colorado. First, record spending. This is really the most we've ever spent on elections. About $200 million all told, which is a dramatic increase from 2014. You will see, so the Colorado Senate race was $17 million. Ballot initiatives were $186 million. The governor's race, including some of those folks that self-fund, at least $22 million. And one of the ballot initiatives alone was like $41 million, that oil and gas Prop 112 that I'm sure you saw a lot about. So record spending in Colorado, and some really interesting results coming from that. But before we get to the results, let's talk a little bit about the turnout. As you know, Colorado is an all-mail ballot state, which usually means that we get a very, very big turnout. And in a midterm, we don't usually see as much turnout as we're seeing right now, or in this last election cycle. It was closer to a presidential year in terms of turnout. So it's actually the highest we ever had in a midterm. And the U's, or unaffiliateds, really were the deciding factor in this election. In fact, 761,124 of them turned out or turned in their mail ballot on election day, which is 33% of unaffiliated voters. And we had 32.6% turnout for Republicans and 32.8% for Democrats. So you can see the U's really made the difference in this election cycle. We didn't get every voter out there, but I would say most of the state. The other important thing to know is who turned out in those elections. Democratic women were a huge factor. Over 445,000 Democratic women voted. So I think based on those turnouts, you're really going to see what those voters decided. And this is really interesting. This is the first time we've had a trifecta. All three levels of government, governor, state house, and state senate, are in Democratic hands starting in January. The trifecta is something, like I said, we haven't seen since 1949, and it's also bringing in some really interesting new candidates and new legislators to office. This is the first time that we're going to have an openly gay governor in the country, I believe. It's the first time Colorado is going to have a transgender legislator. And then in our U.S. federal delegation, we're now flipping those roles. So we're now going to have 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans. And so Colorado is also sending its first African American to represent Colorado in the U.S. Congress. And who knows what will happen in 2020? Maybe we'll get an 8th seat, and we'll see how that all balances out. But it's going to be really interesting because we have 2 new members of Congress, both Democrats, Jason Crow and Joe Neguse. And it will be really interesting to see how they find their way in the federal Congress. I think you're going to see a lot of investigations on the federal level, which increases the pressure to our state government and our state legislature. And that's where CAR primarily advocates on your behalf. So let's talk about that legislature and what it looks like now. So first off, the Senate is changing over to Democratic control. They're going to have 19 Democrats to 16 Republicans. And the House, based on the outcome of 2 to 3 recounts that were just decided, is now going to be 41 Democrats and 24 Republicans. Now, what this means is it's going to be really, really important for you to stay engaged with what CAR is doing, because not only are we going to be playing a lot of defense, because there will be no stopgap, because there's no split party control that usually is a little bit of a moderation for us. But it also means that we're going to be playing offense and running some really interesting legislation that we think will help advance Colorado. But before I get to the upcoming legislation in 2019, I just want to take a minute to talk about our ballot initiatives. So despite what you think and whether or not you support Democrats or Republicans, I think we can say that Colorado really had a big win on our ballot initiatives. We said no to just about everything. As we see again, we are very adverse to a sales tax increase of any kind, whether that's for education in Amendment 73, whether that's transportation, either 109 or 110, whichever side of that argument you were on, and also to some really bad land use policy in Amendment 74. But those margins were not even close. So let's talk through those a little bit. First, Y and Z, the redistricting amendments, those passed widely. Colorado's really excited to have some balanced members of those commissions to draw those state and congressional lines. So 70% is the margin by which both Y and Z passed. In terms of Amendment 73, the education funding measure, Coloradans said 56% said no, 45% said yes. In Amendment 74, the land use takings initiative that was written so broadly that Carr and many other stakeholders opposed it, that was defeated at a rate of 54% no, 47% yes. Also, those transportation initiatives both failed by 60% margins, so we're very tax adverse, as I mentioned before. Finally, 112, which you heard so much on your airwaves and everywhere along election season, was soundly defeated at 57% against, 43% in favor. But what's going to be interesting for all of you and members at Carr is those issues, whether it's education or transportation funding or affordable housing, all of those issues are going to carry over into the legislative session because we didn't fund it at the ballot box. So now it falls back onto our policymakers' plates to make those hard decisions. And there's a couple of different transportation mechanisms they'll be looking at. Senate Bill 1 refers another ballot measure in 2019, so we'll have to watch and see how the legislators react. Will they amend their facets of that legislation, or will they keep it the same? Education, we're going to have to figure out how to funding. The governor's budget from the Hickenlooper, his last budget, which will probably be superseded by a new Polis budget, really prioritizes education. So it's going to be a dramatic fight over the general fund and how we fund things in Colorado, because we're seeing, again, a record surplus. But that puts all of our issues in play, especially when we think about affordable housing. Affordable housing is just on everyone's minds, whether you be a new home buyer looking to find a place to live in Colorado, or you're a legislator trying to make sure it's affordable for civil servants to live in your district, to even businesses who want to retain and expand and have employee housing. So real estate's going to be in the crosshairs. It's going to be a really critically important session for you to stay engaged, and we need your help. So please, please pay attention to everything we're sending you. It's going to be one of those sessions that's going to be a really long 120 days, but I think we're up to the challenge and we're excited to have you along with us. We are looking at a couple of different legislative initiatives to deal with housing. One of them is expanding the first-time homebuyer savings account for employers to match or offer as some sort of corporate benefit for their employees. We're also looking around about the homestead tax exemption. Are there reforms we can look at to make sure that it has a market effect for some of our seniors? Like, could they downsize, for example? We're going to be looking at a bill that reforms some of your liability and filling in deeds. But I think you're going to see some of our most troublesome opponents or bills that we haven't liked in the past back with roaring force, whether it's a document fee or a transfer tax or inclusionary zoning. I think it's going to be really important for you to pay attention and stay engaged, and we're just so happy to have you with us, and I thank you for taking the time with me today, and rest up now because January will be here before you know it. Thanks so much.